Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another installment in the comprehensive yet informal study of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason series. It's quite the lengthy title, and of course, it gets shortened in the YouTube uploads, but we're glad you're here. I have a new watcher of this consistently, which, I mean, the numbers have gone up from, like, the original, like, below 10. We've now got roughly 20 views per Kant study, so that's cool. That's going up, but um, they're still, so they're getting up there, but there's a new person commenting now, and engaged. So um, I'm forgetting their name. It was a little long, so my apologies. I'm a little out of it today in general, but anyway, so I just wanted to shout that out, and I'm glad the series is doing well. I'm glad you're here watching with us today. We're in the systematic representation of all synthetic principles. We've been in here for quite some time. It's quite a beefy section. Lots of stuff going on. Lots of the synthetic principles being represented and attaching to objects and creating. Right now, in the past few sections, in the past few parts, in the past few recordings, we've really been concerned with empirical experience and how that works. But I mean, even before that, more generally, we were just thinking about experience um, in general, even involving things like space and time, which for Kant are not um, empirical intuitions, but pure intuitions. And if you're interested in the difference, go all the way back to the beginning, the transcendental aesthetic. It's where he broke that down. Anyway, so we're here today. We're at, we left off at this paragraph. We had to break this up into two parts because this is quite a long elucidation. But let's review because it's always a bit jarring. As I explained to Kirk, who's here with me today, it's a bit jarring when you just kind of pick up in the middle of a section without reviewing. So we can review. So we were talking. We started right this section last time, right? And finished this bit, just this short bit here. We were going over the postulates of empirical thinking in general. Um, and I take this to mean just sort of things that I'd say I don't really know. 78. Maybe there's a. Hang on. I'm gonna get my copy real quick and see if I can figure out. Actually, I never actually like looked what postulates means. I just took it to mean like basic principles that make empirical experience possible. But there's a footnote here. I didn't check that out. Let me see if I can do that really quickly. I'll be right back. Okay, got the physical critique with me here. Let me put on the headset so I can hear Kirk. But okay, yeah. So got the critique here. This is footnote 78 on page 321. 321, footnote 78. Okay. I see. So let's read what this says here on my physical copy. The following postulates in their discussion bring to a head Kant's contrast between logical and real relations, especially between logical and real possibility, which had been the basis of his critique of rationalism since the 1763 attempt to introduce the concept of negative magnitude into philosophy. For an anticipation of the mature doctrine from as early as 1764 to 1766. See these, and then just see a bunch of notes. So Kant here is really interested in sort of, I guess, let's see what he says, logical possibility, which I think I was getting tripped up with these with these definitions last time, and I'm glad he wrote them down in the footnotes. It allowed me to make a lot more sense. I realized he was talking about things in time as time determinations, which makes sense with the general section of where we're at, especially following the transcendental schema. But good. So this footnote actually solidifies that between logical and real relations. So these are real relations, or in other words, empirical. So these are it seems to be the relations of empirical thinking between things. So things can be possible, things can be actual, and things can be necessary in empirical experience. That is all has to do with time, right? As because time is of inner sense, it's the basis, or it's the pure intuition. It's also the form of inner sense. So in that way, it's the I believe from Kant, what I've gathered so far, if I've interpreted correctly, it's the most basic, in a way of uh, the fact. It's the most basic. Uh, I don't know what the word would be. Type, I guess, of sensibility. So they all relate to time, and they broke that a lot down more in things like the transcendental schema, and even the analogy to experience when we were going over substance, causality, and simultaneity. That was the other one I was forgetting earlier. Um, anyway, all right. So possibility that can be given to a corresponding intuition, actuality, um, what actually is determined in time, and then necessity, what is determined through the concept of time. So whatever is like, I guess, an implication or a direct result of time itself, that I guess isn't time itself, would be exist necessarily. And you might ask, well, what would be such a thing? And I'm thinking he's getting at something like the analogies of experience and those time determinations that are substance, causality, and um, simultaneity. So, which we went over not too long ago. So feel free to see those as well whenever I upload these to YouTube. I've been doing a lot better job at catching up, and a lot more of these studies are uploaded now on my channel. So anyway, then we started this elucidation um, last time. So let's see. Kant was talking about. Oh yes, Kant was basically just breaking down that we need to determine things, and then we consider their modality in terms of possibility, actuality, necessity. Right. So see more of last time for that. Then the postulate, the possibility things requires. Right. I think he's just breaking that down more. Logical conditions. Right. And then he brings up again, you can't just derive existence just from something's possibility. So which again would make sense with a footnote, his attack on rationalism, right? Which is what people like Spinoza do. They like to, and at least from Kant's perspective, they like to analyze concepts and then just try to like argue their existence from the definition. So Kant's just like, nope, you can't do that, buddy. There's a difference between possibility and actuality. So that brings us to where we are today. So that was a long introduction. 8.5 minutes. I feel like my longer introductions have been around 7, but I guess just that we're getting pretty. Although I did have to get up and get my critique, so it was probably around a. The longer the introductions, they get longer because the material gets more dense. So, and sometimes I just forget as well. So, anyway, I'm a bit warm. I'm just gonna take off my sweatshirt and then we can begin. So give me 1 second.
Would you like to read next,
The
or
consequences of doing philosophy and empirical reality. Okay. Kirk.
I can read
Yeah.
if you like?
Yeah. Go ahead if you have no other like preliminary remarks or anything like that.
So we shall now make obvious the extensive utility and influence of this postulate of possibility. If I represent to myself a thing that persists, so that everything that changes merely belongs to its states, I can never cognize from such a concept alone that such a thing is possible. Or if I represent something to myself that is so constituted that if it is posited, something else always and inevitably succeeded, this may well be able to be so thought without contradiction. But was there such a property as causality will be encountered in any possible thing cannot thereby be judged. Um, Finally, I can represent various things, substances to myself that are so constituted that the state of one is followed by consequence in the state of the other, and conversely. But whether such a relation can pertain to any of things cannot be derived from these concepts which contain a merely arbitrary synthesis. Just only from the fact that these concepts express a priori the relations of the perceptions in every experience does one cognize their objective reality, i.e. their transcendental truth, and be sure independently of experience, but yet not independently of all relation to the form of an experience in general and the synthetic unity in which alone objects can be empirically cognized.
Thank you. So let's break that down. That was a lot.
Yeah.
So Kant says, let's just explore. Let's make obvious, right, what this postulate of possibility does for us. What does it do? So if, right, thought experiment. If I represent to myself a thing that persists, right, something like, right, this classic rationalist example, right, Descartes and the wax. Hope that's applicable here. I remember one of the recent times I tried to bring it up. Kirk was here, remembers probably. I kind of failed, and it was a bad example, but generally it's a good example. So let's say, okay, we have a thing that persists, right? The wax from Descartes, the candle. In that, if you don't know what that means, Descartes brings in his meditations on first philosophy, he brings up to explain what he means by substance, right? He brings up the example of a candle, right? A candle is solid wax, and then it melts away, but we can still tell it's the same candle. He argues that this is because it has substance. So let's, and that's what Kant is talking about here. It seems based on what Kirk read later on. So let's see, right? Yeah, substances. So let's see. If I represent a thing to myself that persists, okay, the candle, so that everything that changes merely belongs to its states, I can never cognize from such a concept that such a thing is possible. Ah, interesting. I can never cognize from such a concept alone that such a thing is possible. Which is really interesting. This is direct shot at Spinoza. Patrick is not here with us, and he hasn't been for quite some time. This is very sad. I've been uploading these Kant study videos to YouTube, and I've just been hearing his like analyses and his voice because I've been watching it over because part of my homework actually this semester is to read essentially through like the whole critique, so or at least the majority of it. So this study that I've been doing has been overlapping with my homework in grad school, but so I've been watching it and engaging with the critique as I've been uploading them as well. Just to get more, and I'm understanding a lot better. But I miss Pat's very very helpful summarizations and opinions, and I feel like he would say something here. Maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. Maybe he would just acknowledge as well. This is a shot at Spinoza. Maybe to give his opinion on it because he's quite sympathetic to Spinoza's philosophy, at least as of when we last spoke to him. So anyway, so Kant here is taking a shot at Spinoza. I can never cognize such a thing as possible, which is really interesting. I guess if you just imagine something, I get not even right though, because if you can imagine something, it's possible, right? Because to imagine would be to use what Kant referred to earlier, I believe, is the transcendental, or it's either I can't remember the English words, but synthesis speciosa is when we actually like imagine something specifically in time. So if I represent to myself a thing that persists, I don't know how you do that outside of time, so it should be possible. So I don't really understand what he's saying here. It seems like he's contradicting himself. So now let's get a bruh, and hopefully let's understand. Or if I represent something to myself that is so constituted, that if it is posited as something else, and inevitably succeeds it, this may well be a contradiction. Well, there's such a property as causality will actually encounter any possible. Oh. Okay. Uh, I see what he's saying. I feel like he's confusing his own words. I feel like he's meaning to say these things aren't necessarily actual. I feel like he's right. Let's go back up here to his. Uh, let's go to these because I find these very easy, especially as they relate to time, right? So the concept of which can be given a corresponding intuition as possible. We can think of, like, for example, the candle of wax. That exists. That is a concept that can be given a corresponding intuition. How do we know this? Well, we know this because they're actual. We know this because we can determine that I determined candles in time before. I went candle shopping with my girlfriend a little a few weeks ago. That all the candles there were determined in time. They were actual. So certainly they're possible. I don't understand what he means that unless I'm using the wax is not a valid example, but I feel like what Kant is saying here, or at least like what he means, is that they're not necessarily actual, right? Just because we can think of something. Where was I? Oh, here. Uh, uh, just because we can think of things like persistence across time, or just because we can think of two things, like two substances, and have them like one cause another, right? Uh, but or just some, right? Or just literally as Kant says, right? Posit something, and then something else, so that it always inevitably succeeds it. That's not necessarily actual. We could just totally imagine that and never actualize it in empirical reality. I feel like that's the only way this makes sense because these things are definitely possible. Right? It will be encountered in any possible thing. So even here, he's kind of conceding that these are possible, but will we actually encounter them in time? In will we determine them in time in our experience? Not necessarily the case. Okay. Finally, I can represent various things, substances to myself that are so constituted that the state of one is followed by consequence the other, but conversely. Oh, right. He's talking about simultaneity here, I think, right? Well, there's such a relation. Yeah. Which contain an arbitrary synthesis. I think what does this mean? I'm not exactly sure. I think it just probably just means it could not right. It's possible. It's just it's contingent, right? It's not it doesn't seem necessary. It doesn't even necessarily seem actual. Thus, only from the fact that these concepts express a priori the relations of the perception to every experience is not does one cognize their objective reality. Wait, hold on. I gotta slow down. Thus, only from the fact that these concepts express a priori the relations of the perceptions in every experience, only from the fact that these concepts, the relations. Oh, does one cognize their objective reality, the transcendental truth, to be sure, independently of experience, but yet not independently of all relation to the form of an experience in general and the synthetic unity of cognize. So I think Kant is just saying that um, just because these uh, concepts express a priori the relations of perception in every experience, uh, or no, thus only from the fact that concepts. Oh, never mind. Okay, I'm glad I read that multiple times. Okay, Kant is just saying that you can't be sure that you'll actually like find this in reality for sure. Like you may not be able to determine this in actuality. So you can only deduce these things a priori. This is, I think, really just what he's saying. You can only find this out um, through like only from the fact these concepts express a priori the relation of their perception and experience does one cognize their objective reality, either transcendental truth. So only I guess upon reflecting these ideas in our minds can we understand these. We can't right do what David Hume did and try to look at experience and pull these things out. Right? Okay, yeah, this actually makes a lot of sense. Assuming I'm right, I could be wrong, but right, David Hume's example, right? He's like, if you, um, his one famous example is the one about the billiard balls, and I forget the exact wording. I haven't read Hume in like a few years actually. I probably should read Hume again just to refresh, but especially he's so relevant to Kant and as we're seeing now. But um, to my memory, David Hume essentially sets up a thought experiment, right, where we have billiard balls, or just like uh, for American culture, like a pool table, right? And if you're at a pool table and you're about to like sh- take, it's your turn and you're about to, God, I don't even know the pool terms. If you like shoot the Kirk, do you know pool?
Do I know pool?
Like the words, like the what's the thing you use to hit the balls?
The cue.
The cue. Thank you. God, huge brain fart. Thank you, Kirk. um, so let's say you're playing pool and you are gonna hit the balls with your cue. You can't know like before you do them. But before you take your turn and before you hit the balls with the cue, you can't know where the balls are gonna end up exactly. You actually have to like see it to and experience it to know for sure. Um, and Kant would agree with that, right? Because Kant is saying we can't just because we represent something to ourselves, like maybe in our imagination, doesn't mean that's actually going to be what happens in actuality, right? It's an arbitrary synthesis. So, and that's what David Hume said as well. Almost verbatim. I mean, again, I haven't read him in a few years, but his at least in like conceptually, that's verbatim what David Hume says. Like it's an arbitrary connection of ideas. Maybe that's what. Oh God, this is another good reason why we miss Patrick. I mean, just generally, but also he was really helpful with these like references to the history of philosophy, but that I'm not so sharp on myself. But Hume, right, said they're essentially an arbitrary connection of ideas, um, an arbitrary synthesis, right, in Kantian terms. We can't actually derive the a priori objective reality. So Kant says, I agree with you. You can't do that. Um, just from possibility, right? From the postulate of possibility. Just because something is possible doesn't mean that it becomes actual. But Kant doesn't think that that's all causality is, right? As we saw from the transcendental deduction and the schema and the analogy of experience. And here, like, right, all these sections of logic, he obviously thinks that causality is still an a priori part of our experience. How do we know that? We can't know it through arbitrary synthesis of possibility. We have to know it from the fact that these concepts express a priori the relations of perceptions in every experience. So we have to think about our experience a priori, sort of maybe do our own transcendental, or just go back in the critique of pure reason if we can't do it ourselves, right? And that's kind of one of why Kant is so revolutionary, is because nobody seems to, at least, have written it down if they did do it, and made these connections and reflected upon their experience in such a way where they realized that it is an a priori component. Um, and it's something found in the understanding and not in the objects. And even if it is in the understanding, it's not in an arbitrary synthesis of the understanding. Um, it's transcendentally true. So big response to Hume here. Before I guess our response to Barclay coming up later, and just after this elucidation next time, we're doing the refutation of idealism. But anyway, so big response to Hume there is what I took out of that. Do you have any questions or follow up on this, Kirk?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. I suppose I'll read this long paragraph next. But if one wanted to make entirely new concepts of substances, of forces, and of interactions from the material that perception offers us, without borrowing the example of their connection from experience itself, then one would end up with nothing but figments of the brain. The wording of that is very funny to me. For the possibility of which there would be no indications at all, since in their case one did not accept experience as instructress. God, Kant's writing is so. I don't know if it's just the English translation, but like, who uses the word instructress? Oh my God,
Bruh.
it's never gets old. Nor borrow these concepts from it. Invented concepts of this sort cannot acquire the character of possibility a priori like the categories as conditions on which all experience depends, but only a posteriori, as ones given through experience itself, and their possibility must either be cognized a posteriori and empirically or not cognized at all. A substance that was persistently present in space without filling it, like that intermediate thing between matter and thinking beings, which some would introduce. 80. I'm gonna go to that. What is that? What is he referring to? I can't tell from his immediate language. Footnote 80. Sorry, I just think this is a really abstract thing so far, and if he could provide a concept, it'd be really interesting to see what he's talking about. What page is this? 324. Okay. Okay. Footnote 80. Let's see. Or endnote, I think is the proper term. This could appear as a reference to the existence of. I guess the translators don't even know. This could appear to be a reference to the existence of an ether as a condition of possibility of perception, which Kant argues for in his Opus Posthume, especially in the sections known as Übergang. However, since Kant goes on to say that the possibility of this third thing is entirely groundless because it has no basis in experience, that's literally just what we were talking about. While he substantially argues that existence of the ether is actually a condition of the possibility of experience, it would seem that he is here considering and denying the possibility of a third kind of substance in addition to matter and mind, rather than extremely refined form of matter, which is how he conceives of who later conceives of the ether. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, Opus Posthume, I believe, is one of the last Kant writings, at least big philosophical writings that Kant wrote, and maybe I don't even know when it was published posthumously or not, but it's one of the last major philosophical writings that we know of Kant's life. And I guess he argues that something called the ether is a possibility of is a condition of the possibility of perception, which I don't really know what that is, and I feel like we'd be going way off we'd be not focused enough if we went on a little exploration to figure out what that is. But the interesting thing that I'm pulling from this is Kant seems to be arguing here that well, they say right here, right? Here he's talking about something between matter and mind, right? So like this again goes back to Descartes. Um, uh, oh, right. Okay. Matter of thinking beings, which some would introduce. So maybe some people think, right, they're trying to figure out Cartesian dualism, right? Descartes. There's like thinking substance and extended substance or matter, and maybe some people after him. I don't know. That I should tighten up my knowledge of this area of history philosophy as well. The post-Cartesians, rationalists that are not Spinoza or Leibniz, maybe they introduced something. Like some third thing in between mind and matter. And I guess Kant is just saying that doesn't exist. And I guess Kant does come up with something like the ether, which I don't know what that is, but actually they say here it's an extremely refined form of matter, which is a possibility of perception. I don't know. Kant writes about that in Opus Posthume. I'm sure if I continue to be very uh, extremely acutely interested in Kant, I'll read that at some point in my life. But anyway, yeah. So Kant's just kind of saying no, you can't get this third thing between matter and thinking, especially if you're looking to experience for it, because it can't be a priori. So it seems to just be what he's saying here. Or a special fundamental power of mind to intuit the future. What the fuck? Where is this coming from? A special fundamental power of mind to intuit the future, not merely say deduce it. I guess he's just saying, yeah, okay. He's just kind of going through I don't know if this was taken seriously back then, but I don't think anybody today is arguing that such things. I mean, I guess the first thing sounds a lot more possible, especially maybe analytic discussions of the mind body problem or this. But I don't think anybody, at least today, is arguing that there's we have a special fundamental power of mind to intuit the future, not say deduce it. Which even deducing the future is something dubious. So I don't know, intuiting the future, Well, I guess some people do that, right? Some people are like, "Oh, come to me. I'm like a psychic. I will tell you your future." So maybe he's referring to that. I assumed he was like just talking about like the rigorous academic like body of philosophers, but of his time or something. But I don't know. Maybe he's just attacking that in general. Or finally, a faculty of the mind to stand in a community of thoughts with other men, no matter how distant they may be. These concepts, the possibility of which is entirely groundless because it cannot be grounded in experience and its known laws, and without this is an arbitrary combination of thoughts that, although it contains no contradiction, can still make no claim to objective reality, thus to the possibility of the sort of object that one would here think. As far as reality is concerned, it is evidently intrinsically forbidden to think it in concreto without getting help from experience, because it can only pertain to sensation as the matter of experience and does not concern the form of the relation that one can always play within fictions. So, this is basically a long way of saying that um, we can think things and we intuit things, um, and then they get combined in experience through a mixture of thinking and intuiting. There's no third power, especially not that you can just derive from experience itself. Um, that can do anything other than like make fiction. um, I don't know. I guess the immediate. I don't know if how accurate or correct this would be. Just off the top of my head, this like I don't know, like Star Wars, like the Force. I guess Kant saying like you can actually. That's not actually real, guys. The Force isn't real. That's like a third substance that like we have come up with based on looking at reality. Um, and just like thinking of it, and it doesn't have anything to do with the a priori categories. It doesn't have anything to do with even like how we experience reality a posteriori. There's just nothing, no grounding at all. Entirely groundless. But they're possible, I guess, right? I guess they could be conceived of in time, so they're possible. But they're groundless in terms of objective reality. So I guess he's just playing around with the possibility and saying, hey, because possibility exists, we can have fictions. It's really just a long way of saying that. So anyway, I find that interesting. Those are all my comments for that paragraph. Kirk, do you have anything or questions or?
In particular.
Okay. Do you want to read? This one's really short, so do you want to read the next two paragraphs, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
But I leave aside everything, the possibility of which can only be derived from actuality and experience, and consider here only the possibility of things through concepts a priori, about which I proceed to assert that it can never occur by itself solely from such concepts, but always only as formal and objective conditions of experience in general. It may look, to be sure, as if the possibility of a triangle could be cognized from its concept in itself. It is certainly independent of experience, for in fact we can give it an object entirely a priori, i.e., constructed. But since this is only the form of an object, it would still always remain only a product of the imagination, a possibility of whose object would still remain doubtful, as requiring something more, namely that such a figure be thought solely under the condition those conditions on which all objects of experience rest. Now, that space is a formal a priori condition of our experiences that this very same formative synthesis by means of which we construct a figure in imagination is entirely identical with that which we exercise in the apprehension of an experience in order to make a concept of experience of it. If this alone that such connects connects with this concept of representation of possibility of such a thing. And thus the possibility of continuous magnitudes, indeed even of magnitudes in general, since the concepts of them are all synthetic, is never clear from the concepts themselves, but only from them as a formal conditions of determination of objects and experience in general, and where should one want to seek objects that correspond to the concepts, if not an experience through which alone objects are given to us? Although without anticipating experience itself, we can cognize and characterize the possibility of things solely in relation to the form of conditions under which something can be determined as an object and experience at all. That's fully a priori, but only in relation to these conditions and within their boundaries.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to spend too long on this because a lot of it just seems to be repetition. or at least was implied from what he said before. So, do want to point out though, I think it is interesting that he comes after the mathematical realists, right? Um, or in a way, I mean, I want to say like comes after like Pythagoras and Plato. My knowledge and memory of like Greek philosophy is very limited, so don't want to like make too big of a claim there. But what I mean by that is that right, geometry, a triangle can be cognized from itself. Doesn't mean it actually. Um, he said it so well. Where is it? Oh, it exists in our imagination first and foremost, and we can actually say that it is something that exists. It's possible. Um, and it's different, right, from like what I brought up from before with like the Force, right, in Star Wars, where we look at empirical experience and then we can like come up with fictions about it. It's a different kind of imagination. It's a priori, certainly. Um, but just by analyzing the concept of itself, we can't deduce its reality. Just because we say it's a priori and we acknowledge that it's so like yeah necessary universal concept doesn't mean we can actually bring this if we want to make it quote unquote real in any way or like actual, we have to look at it transcendentally, right, like he did in the aesthetic when he analyzed geometry. um, so yeah, this has been going on for a bit long, and we have a bit, well, not super long, but we have a lot more to get through, a good amount more to get through anyway. So I think that's all I want to say about that for now. Let me just look this over really quickly and see if there's anything missing. Uh, right, possibility is just different from experiencing it. Right. Well, yeah, he's saying now that space is formally per condition of outer experiences. This is very formative synthesis. Right. So obviously triangles play an important role, and they're like transcendentally real, I guess. I don't. That seems to be like a Kant scholarship term that I'm not at this point. I don't really know if I'm using that correctly, but in the sense of he's saying yes, it is. Um, it does actually. We do actually. It is actually a concept of like it's a concept of experience because space is formally a prior condition of outer experiences. But notice how we have to appeal to um, space as an a priori intuition, namely that of outer sense, right, outer experience, to acknowledge the triangle as a concept of experience. We can't just analyze the triangle in its a priori nature alone. We have to go further and acknowledge its transcendental um, components to as he says, you connect this concept, the representation of the possibility of such a thing. It's never clear from the only formal conditions of determinations of the experience. Right. Basically, we have to be transcendental. We can't just analyze concepts. So, okay. Any questions about that, Kirk?
Not in specific.
Cool. All right. I suppose I can read. Oh yes, and then we'll be done with this. Oh wait, did we? Yes. Okay, we read this. Okay, so we only have. I'll guess I'll finish up the reading and we'll do some analysis, and then we'll call it a day and get to the refutation of idealism. Exciting stuff. So let's go. The possibility, not, I've already fucked it up. The postulate for cognizing the actuality of things requires perception, thus sensation of which one is conscious. Not immediate perception of the object itself, the existence of which is to be cognized, but still its connection with some actual perception in accordance with the analogies of experience. which exhibit all real connection and experience in general. So for something to be actual, we have to experience it in accordance with the analogies of experience, which are, again, substance, causality, and simultaneity. If those things exist in time with a thing, then it's actual. Perfect. In the mere concept of a thing, no characteristic of its existence can be encountered at all. Again, seems repetitive, but he's just really hammering this point home. Spinoza is wrong. Again, that's what he's saying. For even if this concept is so complete that it lacks nothing required for thinking of a thing at all of its inner determinations, still existence has nothing in the least to do with all of this, but only with the question of whether such a thing is given to us in such a way that the perception of it could in any case precede the concept. For that the concept precede Wait, what? For that the For that the concept precede the perception signifies its mere possibility. But perception, which yields the material for the concept, is the sole characteristic of actuality. However, one can also cognize the existence of the thing prior to the perception of it, and therefore cognize it comparatively a priori, if only it is connected with some perceptions in accordance with the principles of their empirical connection. The analogies. So I guess you don't have to perceive something for it to exist. But then, if you're not perceiving it, how does it? How do you know it exists? You cognize it comparatively a priori if only it is connected with some perceptions in accordance with the principles of their empirical connection, the analogies. So, applying this to something interesting like God, right? uh, I guess Kant would argue that you can't cognize God with any perceptions in accordance with the principles of with the analogies of experience. You can't cognize God in terms of this is really anti-Spinozist. You can't cognize God in terms of substance. Um, Again, this is like empirical. He differentiated it from logical substance, which, of course, Spinoza is talking about logical substance when he's talking about God. But that's exactly kind of the difference, though, right? Is that I guess Spinoza doesn't really conceive of a difference, and Kant does. So for Kant, there's no like empirical or experiential substance to God. There's no causality empirically to the concept of God, and there's no simultaneity with the concept of God uh, empirically. So uh, I guess it doesn't exist empirically. God, right? And maybe sure, maybe God isn't the best example, but maybe some theist would say like, oh, of course God doesn't exist empirically. God transcends the empirical. So I don't know. Maybe this isn't a. I think we'll get to more like abstract metaphysical God. We'll get to metaphysics. I'm almost positive. Again, I didn't really read this part or the other further parts of the critique so much in undergrad, so that's one of the reasons why I started the study. So we'll see what he says about God, and we'll see what he says about just metaphysical entities in general, like the soul, as well, when we get to the ideas of pure reason and the transcendental dialectic and all that good stuff. But at least we know God can't exist empirically. I think that's something we can say from this section so far. So just as an example, because philosophically interesting. Hopefully, it seems a lot of people interested in metaphysics and epistemology are interested in. Well, even just going back to even if you're not interested, right? Kant is interested in it, right? The three big metaphysical questions, right? Does God exist? Does the soul exist? And
Free will.
um,
I'm pretty sure it's free will.
there are three like big questions. I know freedom does become a huge concern for him in general. I just don't know if that's one of like the three things he says is of interest
I'm pretty sure
in
it's
this.
God, immortality of the soul, and free will.
It could be. Okay, sure. Let's just say it's that. So
Yeah.
I don't feel like taking more time to look back, but yeah, thank you, Kirk. So yeah, at least we can know that those things don't exist empirically because they don't we don't perceive them, and they're not in accordance with the principles of empirical connection. So the analogies. So anyway, all right, moving on. For in that case, the existence of the thing is still connected with our perceptions in a possible experience, and with the guidance of the analogies we can get from our actual perceptions to the thing and the series of possible perceptions. Thus, we can cognize the existence of a. I used God. He uses the example of magnetic matter. So I guess magnetism, the existence of magnetic matter penetrating all bodies from the perception of attracted iron filings, although an immediate perception of this matter is impossible for us given the constitution of our organs. I see. So he's basically talking about things we can't see but exist empirically, like magnetic matter. I don't even know if that's something like physicists still agree exists. Shout out to Daniel, my roommate from college who was a physics and still is a physics major. He would be able to help me out here. I might actually ask him this later, but interesting. I don't know if magnetic. I don't. I thought magnetism was conceived more as a force. Uh, Start with people like Tesla, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a physicist or nor a historian of physics. So anyway, but Kant is just bringing this. Just take any matter, right? Take a look. We could just say like cells, or well, no, I guess we can see cells with like particles, right? Like or a quark, right? That's something that Kant didn't know exists, but that's another example, right? That we could use here, in the sense of immediate perception is impossible, but it still makes sense because it follows the uh, empirical connection. It follows the analogies basically. So, in accordance with the laws of sensibility in the context of our perceptions, we could also happen upon the immediate empirical intuition of it in an experience in our senses, the crudeness of which does not affect the poor and possible experience in general or finer. Thus, wherever perception and whatever is appended to it in accordance with the empirical laws reaches, there too reaches our cognition of the existence of thing. Wait. Thus, wherever perception, whatever is appended to it in accordance with the laws reaches, there too reaches our cognition of the existence of things. If we do not begin with experience or proceed in accordance with the laws of the empirical connection of appearances, then we are only making a vain display of wanting to discover or research the existence of anything. However, a powerful objection against these rules for proving existence immediately is made by idealism, the refutation of which belongs here. Boom! So he's saying idealism says that you can prove the existence of things with just your mind, right? You don't need perception. I guess that's what he's taking, and we'll get into that. There's a whole lot to get into here, I'm sure. Starting this footnote, which we'll get to next time, because we're already at 47 minutes, and this is a lot in here. So we'll do that next time. But yeah, we can't determine the existence of things without the laws of perception or perception, which is really interesting. Again, based on the footnote, I'm guessing he's differentiating between empirical existence and logical existence. Or I don't even know if existence is like a logical category for Kant, or just a logical entity for Kant. Because what would you say about the categories, for example, right? Like just like the pure concepts of the understanding. Do those not exist? Like I would say they like it's following Kant, right? I would say they exist in some sense in that they're like transcendentally real, but they're transcendentally like they're components of like the transcendental philosophy that makes experience possible. So I don't know. I don't know exactly the scope of which he's using existence. I can't remember if he's the term, but at least empirically, I know. But maybe he's going further and saying things only can empirically exist, which again wouldn't really make much sense given literally like everything else he said before about like space, time, intuitions, concepts. So interesting stuff. Do you have any questions about this section, Kirk, or just anything related to this in general?
No.
Okay. In that case, Kantian wisdom of the day. Don't try to derive things via idealism. Try to derive them from either perception or the analogies of experience, which are also the principles of empirical connection, alternatively named. At least empirically. At least empirically. Again, I don't know the scope of which Kant using existence, but if you're trying to determine whether something exists empirically, use either perception or the analogies of perception in your cognition. Well, that's it for me. Kirk, do you have any closing remarks?
No, everything you said seems to be pretty accurate about what Kant said.
Well, I'm glad. We'll see you all next time for the very exciting, very anticipated. Hopefully, Pat will join us. I'll try to get in touch with him again about going over the refutation of idealism. He was quite excited for that. I'm excited for it. Kirk, you excited for this?
I am.
Hell yeah. Okay, well, we'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye bye.